Good afternoon, folks. We're going to need to go to what we call Max 1 computer. A tornado warning is in effect for Camden and Glenn County, and that is the tornado. Again, this is radar indicated. It is heading to the northwest at about 50 miles per hour. So I'm going to show you the big picture. Again, this is around the perimeter of Hurricane Helene. But again, the eye wall is going to miss us by a long shot. And we'll talk more about the eye wall in a moment. But I want to go into, this is yet another radar indicated tornado warning. So I'm going to zoom on in. This is specifically, although the main concern is for Glenn County. So I'm going to slow this down for you. A radar indicated tornado. So again, this might not necessarily be on the ground, is moving along with this band of thunderstorm activity, more in the way of downpours as opposed to lightning. I'm going to slow it down for you as we take a look at what's happened over the last 3 hours. I'm going to slow it down even more, and let's just take a look at what's happened over the last hour. Okay, so there it is. So this is part of that larger band. Just a while ago, we had a tornado warning for Ware County, but this is all part of the same band of activity. And all of the downpours, really, hesitate to say thunderstorms because it's mostly just downpours. They're racing along to the northwest. But this particular tornado warning is in effect for Camden County. And what I'm going to do here is zoom in. Ross Muma is going to join us. And as I do zoom in, we'll try to pick out for you where the worst of the weather is. And I'm going to slow it down for you a little bit more. And all right, so there we see the motion and the tornado warning. I'll pop up and show it to you there. In fact, I'll pop out the radar. So there's a tornado. The tornado warning is in effect for Camden County. This is till 8:45. So there it is. It technically includes Camden County, but that's just the northern part of Jekyll Island. The main concern for those of you in Glenn County, again, until 8:45. So I'll show you the radar and the portion of the cell that is possibly producing a tornado is right about coming off the island and then headed to the northwest at about 50 miles per hour. All right, so there you see the tornado. Ross Muma is going to help us drive this. So what do you do if you're in Glenn County under again, I want to mention one more time, although Camden County is under the tornado warning, really the concern is off the island now. It's really into Glenn County. So I just don't want you to be confused by the Camden County. We care about you folks in Camden County, but you folks in Camden County are fine. The tornado warning really for Glenn County, and our main concern coming off the island and then in toward Brunswick, where, of course, we know a lot of you live. I think this is the type of tornado, it's not going to pick up a house. It probably is more the type that if there is a tornado, it will blow some limbs, maybe bring down a tree. But at the very least, this is yet another indication of why you don't want to be on the roads now that it's dark and now that we do have within these cells that are coming across and occasionally producing some winds, even gusting to over 50 miles per hour as the winds continue to increase with these cells as the hurricane continues to head to the north. Occasionally, at least radar indicated, producing some rotation. So it could be producing a tornado. So this is when you don't want to be on the roadways. And we're talking primarily about the islands and then getting in toward Brunswick. And what's happening here is Ross is using the velocity. We're trying to pick out a signature where we can actually see it is. Ross is trying to pick it up there. So again, first noted on Jekyll Island and then moving to the northeast at 50 miles per hour. So it's moving quickly. So what that means is for those of you along I-95 and beyond, actually we'll be more concerned about you in the next 15 minutes or so. For those of you in Brunswick, the good news is this concern will not last long, probably about another 15 minutes or so. So there it is, nice signature there, coming off of St. Simon's Island, crossing the estuary and headed toward Brunswick. So that's a pretty good signature there. So this is the time to not be on the roadway. The causeway, you're probably in good shape. But bridges, especially heading toward Brunswick, and now this signature is close to live, but this is not actually a live look. So the concern, and Ross is doing this really probably now, is the estuary and then going beyond the estuary onto the mainland of Glenn County. So for those of you from Highway 17 to 95 and from the marina in Brunswick northward, really to the, maybe even to Darien, now is not the time to be on the road. And I'm just talking about for another 15 to 20 minutes. We would love for everyone over northeast Florida and southeastern Georgia to stay off the roads until tomorrow morning at sunrise. We would love for that to happen. But if you need an extra reason and an extra bullseye for where you want to stay off the road for about the next 15 minutes, this is the spot because of the potential tornado. And at the very least, heavy rain, significantly reduced visibilities, and with it coming right off the water, I would say conservatively you're getting gusts of 50, and there could be some gusts of 55 or even 60 miles per hour. So that's approaching severe thunderstorm levels, even if that rotation is not making it to the ground. But it's serious enough and our concern is there enough so that that tornado warning remains in effect at least until about 8:45. We'll expand the picture to show you. So here's the eye of the hurricane. Go ahead,
Tim,
Ross. If you're
Tim. Well, the good news is it is going to be on the northern fringe there of Glenn and Camden counties and really the Brunswick area. So this outer band is just about to move north of our area. And if you look on radar, I mean, there's a fairly nice gap in between Brunswick and really the next wave of rain that's going to be coming in. Right now, it's just about to hit I-75 there in Gainesville and Alachua County. So down towards Keystone Heights, Union, Bradford County, you're going to soon be seeing that next kind of wave of rain and storms, and that's really going to be the main event. The core of the storm is only, less than 75 miles away now from making landfall. So the outer band's still producing some of those quick spin-ups, some of those isolated tornadoes, but a lot of these that are further out on the out to the ocean, most of these will not move on shore. Maybe one or two there on the western edge might make their way up towards Brunswick, but for the most part, we should see this last storm move out of the Brunswick area, and then after that, Tim, we should get a fairly decent break kind of in between this outer band and really that main event, the main core of Helene starting to make her way on shore.
Yeah, so what Ross is talking about, folks, this outer core here, that's where the winds are blowing out of the southeast, and on the other side of that, the winds are out of the southwest. So as that swings around, that's when we think that'll be the last main event. Now, we want to emphasize our vocabulary here is significant. The outer core does not mean the eye wall. The eye wall is basically right here, and that's where the weather is exponentially worse. Hurricane force winds maybe occur just beyond the eye wall, but the sustained winds of 80, 90, 100, up to 130, that's right with the eye wall. That continues to go right as forecast, and that's going to be significant for those of you in Gainesville and Lake City and Waycross, that the eye wall should stay just to your worst. We're still expecting you to be on the fringes of hurricane conditions, but the conditions just to the west of there, and we're talking for those out toward Suwannee and Madison County, over toward Taylor County, and then Tallahassee will be on the western side. Now, for those of you concerned about Tallahassee, and we are, but if this goes now exactly as forecast, it could be that Tallahassee has the northerly winds with rain, and that might hold wind gusts there to no more than 100 miles per hour. Pretty significant, no doubt. But when you consider the fact that this eye wall, at least indicated by Recon, has sustained winds of 130 and gusts to 150, if Tallahassee only gets gusts to 100, that would be well positive. Perry, Florida, looks like they'll catch the worst of it. Basically, the highest winds will be, of course, as the eye makes landfall, but also where the warm winds can come ashore. Because when I talk about inversion, that means the air is actually warmer above the surface. And that tends to be for anybody to the left of the motion, because the winds are coming off the land, and now that the sun is set and the rain is falling, those temperatures are in the 70s. Whereas the temperatures right over the Gulf are the same temperature as the Gulf, which is about 82 to 86 degrees. And on the right side, because the winds will be coming off the Gulf, that's where the winds will be able to reach their highest intensity as that does come to the north. So that's the eye wall. So when we talk about the core, I'm talking about more this part that is showing up on radar. And as the hurricane races to the northeast and this tail swings by, that's when we're probably going to have the most frequent, at least potential, most frequent potential for winds gusting to over 60 miles per hour. We've already seen some wind gusts up into the 50s and even upper 50s, but extremely isolated. I think this will produce more of a widespread event. Well, here's a look now. So this has just been during the last 30 minutes on the river, getting gusts to 52 miles per hour at NAS Jax, almost 50 there at Mayport. We've seen isolated gusts as well. What's nice to see is we look to the south, on the coast anyhow, at least right now, we don't see anything stronger than that. Now, the sustained winds aren't as strong. The sustained winds are more in about the 25 to 30 mile per hour range, and that's why the bridges haven't been closed. But for all significant purposes, unless you have to go over the higher bridges, what this means is you may be going over the bridge when there might be that brief gust of 50, 55, maybe even over 60 miles per hour. And that may be enough to push you across a lane. And that's why we say, especially at night, if you don't have to go over the higher bridges, don't. Especially for those of you right now in Glenn County where the tornado warning remains in effect until 8:45. Ross, I haven't seen any actually indications of damage. This is all radar indicated. Moving quickly. Was initially seen on Jekyll Island. That is past Jekyll Island. Even the islands now in Brunswick, pretty much past those islands. So this is, as Ross mentioned, the new cells offshore will come onshore north of Glenn County. So that's going to be more of a Savannah event. But even in Brunswick now, the worst of the weather lifting north of the downtown marina area of Brunswick, right there, and probably into and on I-95. So we're going to watch this cell, but this is the area here and why the tornado warning is in effect until 8:45. Again, although it says Camden County, that is really just a technicality. There were some rotation noted on the northern part of Jekyll Island, but it is past there now, and this is clearly just a Glenn County event. So especially for those of you down towards St. Mary's and Kingston or Kingsland, and then those of you out to the west of I-95 in Camden County, at least as far as this tornado warning, you're fine. In Glenn County now, this is the best we can find as far as the signature, so it might be as far to the west, so now off the island, across the estuary, and now on Highway 17. So maybe not quite to 95 yet, but certainly off the island and crossing the estuary and onto Highway 17, racing toward the northwest. If you can picture, it's rotating around the eye of Hurricane Helene, which is now less than 100 miles from making landfall. We think it's probably going to make landfall pretty close to about 11 p.m. due south of Perry, Florida, to the southeast of Tallahassee. But this, of course, is the main event right now with the tornado warning. You can see some of the places that Ross has emphasized where this will be heading toward. So we're now painting areas west of Highway 17 toward I-95 and then off to the northwest. Another example of why even the interstates, although they will continue to be through the night one of the safer places, you just don't know when these isolated rain bands will come. So here's the core. And here are the bands rotating around it, Ross.
Yeah, Tim. So I just kind of wanted to give a whole view of what we're actually looking at here with Hurricane Helene. So those outer bands continuing to come on shore there. So that's kind of the worst that we have left here for at least maybe the next hour or so. Then there is going to be that lull in between, and I'll kind of just draw that in here, or at least put a marker in. There's about a 50 to 75 mile gap in between those last outer bands that are moving on shore there in Glenn County and the Brunswick area, and then that main core of Helene. Now, I will actually draw just how far away it is from some of our areas. So close to the eye wall, likely less than 100 miles or right around 100 miles from Lake City to the core of the storm and to potentially making landfall. We're looking, again, less than probably about 65 to 70 miles away. Let me draw it one last time here for you. Yeah, I mean, certainly less than 75 miles away. So only a couple hours left before Helene does make landfall. Still a Category 4 storm. Let me pull up the latest from the National Hurricane Center. This was the 8 p.m. advisory. So if you missed out on any of this information before, we're on your side with the latest information. 130 mile per hour sustained winds currently, but wind gusts could certainly still exceed anywhere from 150 to even 160 miles per hour as Helene moves on shore, moving to the north-northeast at about 23 miles per hour. But the concerning thing, Tim, is that the pressure is still continuing to gradually drop. I believe at 7 o'clock we had 950 millibars, now to 942. And typically once the pressure drops, the winds gradually pick up shortly thereafter. So although we're at 130 for the time being, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we increase that by maybe another 5 miles per hour or so just before landfall in the next couple of hours, Tim.
Yeah, agreed. If there's just one number that we're going to look at, folks, with hurricanes, and then everything else is tied to it, is the pressure. And like Ross said, that continues to drop. In fact, generally speaking, in textbooks, if you don't have the winds, once you see the pressure drop below about 940 millibars, at least the science says it can support then even heading toward a more significant event. In other words, normally we think of 960 millibars as Category 3, 940, the threshold of Category 4. So at least this supports what the recon is finding. Now, when the recon flies, even now, although they're low, they're flying, now that it's night, they're flying at about 10,000 feet. We call that 700 millibars. So what they're doing is they're measuring the winds at 700 millibars and then estimating what it's like at the surface. They're also using dropsondes, which drops all the way down toward the surface, and those are probably the most reliable, and they have shown occasionally some gusts to about 136 knots. And that would be, yeah, like Ross mentioned, that would be gusts of 150 and maybe more miles per hour. The point we're making here is, remember, this is not where the worst of the weather will be.
Sorry, Tim, I can go back there for you.
That is all right. But the cone is simply saying where the variation in where the eye may go. And so all this is saying, now that we're within hours to go, this is the minor variation we can expect. And that's why that's again, relatively good news for those of you in the Lake City area, because it looks to us like the eye wall will pass about 40 miles to your west. And because the variation with this little bit of time left is probably only going to be about 6 or 10 miles either way. It could be even farther off to the west. But even if it's 6 or 10 miles off to the east, that would still keep the eye wall just west of you. And I'm saying this frequently because it really does matter under this situation, that the winds within the eye wall exponentially increase, or at least the wind damage potential. So whereas in Lake City, we're expecting you to have hurricane force wind gusts and maybe up to near 90 miles per hour. Those are gusts. Whereas just to your west, like you folks, maybe even in western Suwannee County, you sure should plan on sustained winds of 90, maybe sustained winds of over 100 miles per hour, even as far inland as you are. There's the tornado warning, remains in effect until 8:45 in. Okay, here we have a shot of I-95 and Glenn County, and that looks pretty good right there. So I'm trying to figure out where that is. Mile marker 35.7, and my guess is that is probably, okay, so my guess is, though that is... I mean, that would be very, very close to where the circulation would be. All right.
Because, I mean, the core's just now starting to move over I-95.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out, of course, you folks in Glenn County know we're mile marker 35.7, so this is just me. But what I'm thinking is this may be on I-95 to the south of where that band is, because they've already had the rain. And so, therefore, it could be that, that this is south of where the intersection will be, where the tornado goes. But that's just me guessing.
And there are 2 areas of circulation there now, Tim.
Very interesting.
On the latest radar scan. And you could kind of see that on reflectivity, but I think velocity shows the story even better. So just to the north of Dock Junction is what I believe to be probably the first area of circulation or rotation that we were monitoring. But then also just to the north, just to the south of Evelyn. So that's right where Highway, what is that, 99, Highway 17 and I-95 all converge there. A secondary one just to the west of that. You know where Bottle Brush Walk is, there's another area right there, Tim.
So as a reminder, folks, because this is just past live, that means both of these rotations actually at this very moment are now probably just west of I-95. For those of you who are now west and northwest of I-95, they're going to be just west of I-95. Now, this is not me saying that you're okay to drive on I-95. We would prefer you not now that it's nighttime, but just letting you know, as far as this particular cell where Ross has painted is probably where, if these rotations are going to make it to the surface, that's That's where they're going to be. It'd be interesting to me, Ross, if we had a loop of this, if one is going to become dominant and the other one rotating around or even into that rotation.
Yeah, a little bit of the Fujiwara effect when you get two circulations kind of rotating around one of them. As one typically moves north, the other one surges in behind it and kind of takes over. Right. Typically, you get one to be the stronger rotation within the whole circulation of the thunderstorm.
And that's why these cell folks, we try to draw straight lines, but they're always evolving, especially in a tropical scenario where we don't have cold air above, which is normally the impetus for tornadoes to form. This is forming much more because of the warm, humid conditions on the surface, and then things spin up, and it can cause, it's hard for these rotations to maintain one particular core area. And so that's why we very often can see numerous rotations in these cells as they race to the northwest, and the band itself lifts north as the whole hurricane is lifting to the north, really racing to the northeast at about 23 to 25 miles per hour.
So here's a little bit of an outward view of what we're looking at here. Directors, I'm actually going to walk back to the WAM here quick to just kind of show you guys big picture. I can point it out a little bit better this way. So obviously you still have the tornado warning in effect until 8:45 there for the Brunswick area and northern Glenn County now, but these are all the outer bands. So for folks from Brunswick, and even if you're outside of the First Coast TV market, maybe you're just tuning in online or something like that, areas from Brunswick up to Savannah still going to have these isolated thunderstorms in these outer bands. You can almost see the little notches within them that could cause some of those isolated tornadoes. So this is still going to be a concern for coastal southeast Georgia over the next couple of hours and even into southern South Carolina as these outer bands continue to push on shore. Now, further to the west and southwest where the core starts to move on in, yes, winds are beginning to increase, but the overall tornado risk for the time being is really not all that high. Thunderstorms look pretty weak, really just some light to moderate rain for the most part. So nothing looks to be rotating pretty much south of Folkston out towards the Lake City, Fort White, and even to the west of Green Cove for the time being. So really, these are going to be the main concerns over the next couple of hours until, Tim, that main core finally makes its way further to the north and northeast.
Okay, so this goes until 8:45. Let's expand the picture just for a second, and maybe we can time out, Ross. First of all, to see if there are any tornado warnings down south. There had been.
Not for the time being.
And for the time being, and we're talking, folks, all the way down past Tampa. So that is good to see. But maybe we can zoom in, Ross, especially from Tampa and then right along the Gulf Coast, and just time out where this activity will be in about the next 4 to 5 hours. Okay. Because that's the main point we're trying to make, folks, beyond this tornado warning, is that, right there, as the southeast winds then become south and southwesterly, and notice 1132 into the Jacksonville area, earlier for those to the southwest near Gainesville. And again, it's not just going to be one moment. We're just trying to paint, if you're wondering when the main event, and when I say the main event, I mean the main event for those of us who are under tropical storm conditions. The main event for those who are going to be hit by the eye wall, well, it has all to do with the eye wall. But for those of us under tropical storm conditions, it's really going to be as the hurricane gets a beam of us that is due west of us, then the activity to the southeast and south will swing around. And as that swings around, that's when at least the highest potential will be for more in the way of tornadoes. But even if there aren't tornado warnings, that's when we'll have the highest potential for some widespread gusts of 50, 55, maybe even over 60 to 65 miles per hour. And when the sustained winds at least will approach about 40 miles per hour. So that's really, if this tornado watch is dropped at 8:45, and as we go through the rest of the night, that's what we will be watching very closely. And that's another way for us to say that even if we don't get any more tornado warnings for the next hour or so, just be aware, folks, that, again, the hurricane is going to race to the north and northeast, but this other area of some pretty solid, strong winds will be blowing our way, and especially as far as the bridges are concerned, not a good time to be over it. If you're new to the area, as a reminder, it doesn't mean every bridge is dangerous. It's just that there's more wind the higher up you go. And so the higher bridges in the area, specifically in Jacksonville, that would be the Danes Point, the Matthews, the Hart Bridge, but then even some of your flyovers and the bridges over the Intracoastal. And of course, we can talk about the Sidney Lanier or the bridge down over Volano. Any of the higher bridges, the higher the bridge, then the higher the winds will be, versus the Main Street Bridge or the Fuller Warren Bridge. And it's not me saying you want to use those bridges. I'm just saying if you normally would use the other bridges and you have to drive, I would take the longer route, at least for the next 3 to 6 hours. It just would be the safer way to go.
And Tim, right before we reach the end of this tornado warning, I'm not sure if they're going to extend it or not. So in case if they do allow it to expire, latest from our partners at the National Weather Service, they are expecting Helene to make landfall in Taylor County, Florida. That's in the Big Bend region, right around about 10:30 to 11 p.m. It is now less than 70 miles away. So the eye itself is less than 70 miles away from making landfall there in Taylor County. That's what the National Weather Service here in Jacksonville is currently expecting and forecasting in tandem with the National Hurricane Center. So that is just kind of the latest on the timing and potential landfall of Helene here over about the next 2 hours, Tim.
Okay, and we just got word that they're letting the tornado warning in Glenn County expire. The next one is north of Glenn County, and I'm just trying to make sure that the next tornado warning is beyond Glenn County, I believe. Yes, it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, one thing to keep in mind, you do have those other isolated bands about to move on shore in northeastern Glenn County, so we'll just have to monitor those.
We'll be back, folks, and we'll keep you updated through the night. In fact, we're going to have another official update from the National Hurricane Center at 9 p.m.
This has been a First Coast News on Your Side special report tracking Helene.